I think this video is going to be most helpful to those who've been studying the Word with us in Bible study, but I want to point something out to you that I just discovered this morning. In the NIV version of Revelation 12, it says in verse 6 that the woman, the church, fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Well, God moved me to look at the other interpretations of what this taken care of means. We know that the 1,260 days is referring to the witnesses because 1,260 days is only written one other place in the Bible, in Revelation 11, where it talks about the witnesses sharing their testimony, testifying for 1,260 days. And of course, that wouldn't be the only reason why. We can't just match up numbers in the Word. But later on, it tells us in this chapter 12, that now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah for the accuser. So for the accuser, it's going to tell us why. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before God day and night has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So two things required to triumph over the devil and kick his butt out of heaven. He has no place in heaven anymore. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So this is referring to the witnesses who have been testifying and knew that they were going to die, It wasn't a surprise to them. I tell you that all the time. I know and have been told from the very beginning that I was going to die. God counts the cost ahead of time. He knows. And he says, go back down the hill if you're afraid. He does not send his people to war who are afraid. So I've told you that I was tested ahead of time to make sure that I was going to give, that I would be strong enough to give up what I'm required to give up in order to serve, which includes my life, which included my careers, my livelihood, and to trust that he's going to take care of me. Okay, so we know that that's the witnesses. We also know, because the witnesses are killed in the middle of that 7, and we see that in Daniel, the book of Daniel, the sanctuary is thrown down and the daily sacrifice is abolished in the middle of that 7. We know this is the witnesses. There is absolutely no question. However, the translation that I'm finding in the OJB, for example, or elsewhere, there are other places where this is translated in this way. It says, and the Isha, so the woman, fled into the wilderness, where she has there a place, having been prepared by Hashem, that there she can be nourished 1,260 yamin. So 60, that number of days. So it's not just that she's being taken care of, but she's being nourished. And I know that that might seem like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing when you're looking at translation. Because when you see taken care of, later on, I'm going to show you where you see taken care of. Actually, let's go ahead and read it now. So after the devil has gone down to the earth and sea, and he's filled with fury because he knows his time is short, it says in verse 13, when the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. Okay, the church. The woman, the church, was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be, in the NIV it says, taken care of for a time, times, and half a time out of the serpent's reach. But if you're looking at it as she's going to be nourished, then you understand that she's being fed. She may also be being killed by that serpent. And as a matter of fact, we know that she is, because we've been told in the book of Daniel that many of the wise will instruct many, though for a time they will die by the sword, be burned, or captured. We know people are going to be dying there during that time. But if we know that what the word is saying is that she's being nourished during that time, then we can remember that Jesus said, it'll be good for the servant who is giving the food at the proper time. So Luke 12:37, it will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Truly, I tell you, who would dress himself to serve will have them recline at the table and will come to wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the middle of the night or toward daybreak. And then in verse 42, he said, who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of the servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? These are, who does this? The wise who are instructing many, the witnesses who are feeding, who are nourishing for 1,260 days. They are nourishing his church. So I thought that would give you like a cleaner and tighter perspective on what is being discussed here in Revelation 12. Just because you're being nourished doesn't mean that an enemy can't come and, take your life. And we absolutely know that that's going to be happening, that people are going to be killed by the Antichrist during this time. But if we understand that the church is being nourished at that time, that God has allowed for there to be certain servants, certain managers of those servants who are feeding and nourishing at the proper time, well, that gives us a much richer perspective of our duty. It gives us a much richer perspective of what's going on at that time. And we're not confused by, well, I thought you were going to take care of me. Why are people dying, right? Like that just doesn't totally make sense. Now, I want to read this passage to you in Revelation 12 because, we've been discovering that there's stratification in this kingdom. And then we look into the stratification, we're like, then there's stratification for the stratification, right? So as we've been reading, for example, Ezekiel, we see that there are, during the second resurrection, after the 1,000 years, we see in Ezekiel, in that third temple, in Ezekiel 44, that there are Levites who went astray and are going to bear the consequences of their sin. They're not allowed to minister before the Lord, but they are allowed to guard the temple and the work to be done in it. And remember that during the second resurrection, that this is a time period in which certain people, not those who received the mark of the beast, not the false prophet, but certain people who did not make it in the first resurrection will be given an opportunity to be saved only as one escaping the flames. They don't have an inheritance. They don't have an eternal inheritance. They might have an inheritance during that second resurrection period when they've come to life. You see that they have that the prince is to be their inheritance in Israel during that time. But in terms of an eternal inheritance, they don't have that. So you have the Levites who went astray. They're not allowed to serve before the Lord, but they can serve outside of the temple, guard the temple, and the work to be done in it. And then you have the Levitical priests who their inheritance, their possession during this time, not eternal, is to be Christ, is to be the prince. And then you have in Ezekiel 46 a reference to the sons of God who have an eternal inheritance that is never to be taken from them. They are never to be driven off their land. It is to be their property by inheritance. They have an eternal inheritance. These are those who went up in the first resurrection. These are those who in Revelation 20 tells us these are the martyrs and those who've been given authority to judge. It is not all of the people saying right now, we're going up in the rapture, we're going to be resurrected for doing nothing. Jesus paid it all, yay. It's not those people, because those people saying that don't even know their covenant. Like they just don't get it. They're not speaking correctly according to the word. Revelation 20 tells us very clearly, the martyrs and those who've been given authority to judge. I don't know why in the world they would think they've been given authority to judge, or that they're even on the same level as those who are going to die for Christ. That's Looney Tunes. Now, God might change their heart, but if their heart continues in this way, there's not a chance. So now in Ezekiel 46, you see that there are sons of God, and then it's referencing servants of God. And those servants of God, I believe that he's talking about who he just described in Ezekiel 44. The Levites who went far from him, who are serving, they're still servants, described as servants. And then the Levitical priests who are serving inside of the temple. Again, these are not those who went up in the first resurrection. These are those who are being saved only as one escaping the flames, and not all of them will be saved. We know that because Satan has been unbound to go out to the four corners of the earth to deceive those in the earth. And some of them, many of them, most of them are going to be deceived again. Now, what is said in Ezekiel 46 is that the sons of God have an eternal inheritance. The servants of God, if Christ, the prince, chooses to give a gift from his inheritance, it will revert back to him as at the year of freedom. So if he chooses to give that gift, it reverts back to him. They do not have an eternal inheritance. So I've given you that example so that you understand the stratification that there is. Everyone's going to be rewarded according to what they have done. So although there will be a bride that is married to Christ, sons of God, as they're referred to in Ezekiel 46, although they will all go up in that first resurrection, their rewards are going to be different because their roles and responsibilities were different. They picked things up in a different kind of way and at different times. Not all stones in a building, living stones in a temple, have the same function. Some are more vital than others. All are needed. Some are more vital than others. The cornerstone, Jesus Christ, a cornerstone, by the way, is the stone to which everything else in a building is set in reference to that stone. That's the most vital stone. The foundation, the apostles and prophets, vital stone. The capstone, the witnesses, lock everything into place. That's what the capstone was doing. The plumb line makes everything straight. Righteousness is the plumb line. That is what the witnesses are using. That's what you need to be using in order to keep this temple straight. You cannot make this an inclusive temple. It's not inclusive. God never said that. He said it's hard for the righteous to be saved. This is an exclusive temple. You don't allow foreigners who are uncircumcised in heart into his temple. And Paul set that example very clearly, and he taught us to do the same. He taught us how to reprove, and he taught us that we bring a witness the second time when we're reproving something if that person has not listened. And he taught us that if they don't change, they're out. He demonstrated for us what that looks like. When the man who was sleeping with his father's wife was doing that, Paul chastised the church for thinking it was funny, first of all. And second of all, he said, I have already handed him over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh that he might be saved. We don't tolerate these things. We don't put up on a marquee coffee hour, by the way. Let's bring you into your flesh with caffeine. Stupid. The very place God doesn't want you to be. Let's jack you up in the flesh. Free coffee for everyone. And everyone's welcome. Rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. We don't do that. All right, let's take a look at the stratification here. So we have the witnesses who have already died. Well, let's back up even further. We have Christ. We have Christ. The church, Zion, the woman Zion, gave birth to Christ, who will rule with an iron scepter. Then we have the witnesses who are nourishing the church for 1,260 days. They know they're going to die. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. That's the second thing that's required in order to triumph over the devil. The first was the blood of the Lamb. Now in verse 13, when the dragon saw that he'd been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. All that means is he's pursuing the church. The woman, the church, was given the two wings of a great eagle so she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of or nourished for a time, times and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. So does that mean out of his physical reach? No. It means that they are being spiritually protected. They are focused and able to be nourished. He's not able to hinder them from being nourished in the truth. Have you been hindered from being nourished in the truth previously in your life? I just want to get you to consider that, because I know it's kind of an abstract idea that someone could be hindered from being nourished. But when you were of the world, you were not able to be nourished. It wasn't until God gave you that heart to understand him the eyes to see him and the ears to hear. I've been recently talking with someone who said to me, I can't wait to hear about this, that they have a testimony to share with me about what God did with them in January, and that they would have thought I was crazy a year ago. Welcome to my life, everybody thinks that, who have not been given ears, eyes, and a heart to understand the things that I'm saying. You don't know, like you're not able to be nourished until God makes it possible for you to be nourished. And why is that? So that you will understand that it wasn't by anything you did, but that God alone, by his sovereign choice and mercy, decided to give you eyes to see. And this way, none of us will be puffed up, will be ashamed of our detestable practices, and we will know that God alone is the one who saves. Does that mean, like in disgusting counterfeit Christianity, that, well, I couldn't have done anything, so might as well not even try? Or God doesn't want me to do anything, don't use the L word or the W word, works and law. No, it doesn't mean that. If God has chosen you and given you ears to hear, eyes to see, and a heart to understand, he's also moving you by his spirit to follow his laws and keep his decrees, Ezekiel 36, and also chapter 11. And if you're not doing that, you are not one of the ones. Okay, so the dragon has been hurled to the earth. He pursues the woman who gave birth to the male child. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle so she might fly to the place prepared for her where she's being nourished. And that's for 3.5 years. So who's doing that? Because the witnesses are no longer here. Who's nourishing the church? Those of you who are showing up to assemble. Those of you who are the wise who are going to be instructing many. Why do you think I'm so stern about how you must speak? That you must speak on the authority of the one who sent you and not start postulating as the world does, saying, well, I think, or, going off. That's why I maintain what might feel sometimes like it's harsh or rigid, but we have to do that. We have to. And if you look at how Paul was speaking, or you look at how Jesus was speaking, there were times when people were speaking incorrectly, and he literally said to them, are you dull? I mean, that's kind of maybe could be considered harsh to some people. Are you dull? You're not speaking correctly on the word. You're not understanding the word. For example, when people were asking, well, who's going to be the husband of this wife? Because she had, she was a widow several times, and who's going to be her husband in the next stage then? And Jesus said, those who've been found worthy to participate in that resurrection, okay? Those who've been found worthy to participate in that resurrection. You have to understand that. They won't be given in marriage in the next stage. They're going to be like the angels. Christ is their husband. Why would they continue to be given in marriage? So he kind of chastised them for not speaking correctly. What did he say to Nicodemus? Nicodemus said, how can a grown man go back into his mother's womb to be reborn? How did Jesus respond to Nicodemus? He said, you're one of Israel's teachers, and you don't understand the things I'm telling you. You have to be reborn in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. Reborn of heaven in order to enter heaven. You can't be in the flesh, essentially. How are you going to understand when I'm speaking to you of earthly things and you can't understand? How are you going to understand when I'm speaking to you of heavenly things? This way of talking could hurt people's feelings. Is Jesus concerned about people's feelings over their salvation? No. There are times when I say to you guys, you need to get into that closet and dig that stuff out and clean it up. You cannot have things in your closet, because what you're essentially saying is God does not see how I'm living or what I've done. Certainly, that hurts some people's feelings. I'm not concerned about your feelings over your salvation. It's not that I'm not concerned about your feelings. I'm not going to place your feelings over your salvation. There are many people who have come on the channel, who don't like the way that I speak. There are people on this channel right now who didn't like the way I was speaking, who got off the channel, unsubscribed, and God brought them back, saying to them, is she not speaking truth? And if she's speaking truth, why did you unsubscribe? I understand that the things that I say are hard to hear. I understand that the tone that God has me use sometimes, or the ways that he has me speak, it's hard to hear. Does God ever use a tone that's hard to hear? Does he ever shrink you down in godly grief? Does he ever bring you low? Does he ever discipline you? in order to bring you into a position that you could not hear any other way. Why would his servants do anything different? Look at his servants and you tell me which of the prophets was popular. Which of them were people running to and saying, "Oh, tell us, what did the Lord say now?" No, by the time God has to send his prophets to tell you to return to him, you haven't been listening to him. And those of you who are wise right now, let me define that. Those of you actually doing the work and recognizing your teachers and hearing a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." I'm not talking about those of you who turn on the channel and binge watch and think that that's going to save you, because it's not. I've told you very plainly, it will not save you. If you hear the words that I'm speaking or you hear the words in the Bible and you don't put them into practice, there is nothing that can save you, because you have chosen to spurn what has been given to you. I'm here for 1,260 days. 520 of those days are gone. Hallelujah. Don't think I'm not counting the days. That means you have 740 days left with me. What does that mean? It means I'm speaking with you daily on these videos. I offer you the assembly on Saturday, the workshop for free, my books for free, Bible study on Tuesday. I'm here to help you to understand how to return to him, what he requires, what he's been speaking to me. And there are people in these assemblies who are here to share their testimony of how they have come to know God, like the real God, not the many false messiahs and false covenants that are being preached in counterfeit Christianity. The ones showing up are the wise. The ones putting this into practice, those are the wise. And they will, as it's written in Daniel, they will instruct many. They will be giving food at the proper time. They will be around, apparently, for the first 3.5 years. Although some of them, as it's written in Daniel, are going to die by the sword, be burned, and captured. But they'll be around during that Antichrist reign. What will they be doing? Giving food at the proper time. They will be nourishing the church. Now listen to what is written. Okay, so you have to understand the stratification. They are given great responsibility. They will also be given great reward. When the dragon saw he'd been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of. I mean, it's just a totally different thing, isn't it? When you're thinking of this as she will be nourished. Because now you understand that someone's doing the nourishing, that there's some responsibility in here. So where she would be nourished for a time, times, and half a time out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth, the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river and that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast to their testimony about Jesus. Now, let me explain to you what's going on here. I've told you this before. People are going to be dying during that Antichrist reign, but you need to understand that there's a whole 45 days of God's great wrath in which God's people are going to be here. In the book of Daniel, it says that at the 1290th day, from the time that the witnesses have been thrown down and the daily sacrifice has been abolished, right? The sanctuary has been thrown down. Daily sacrifice has been abolished. We're the temple. We're the sacrifice. 1,290 days later, the abomination of desolation will be set up. And blessed is the one who reaches 1,335 days. Well, what did Jesus have to say about the abomination of desolation? He said, when you see the abomination of desolation, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Then will be a time of great distress, such as has never happened since the beginning of the world until that time, and never will be equaled again. This is the time of God's great wrath. I also want to remind you that in Revelation 2 and 3, while God is chastising so he has commended the two lampstands, the witnesses, saying, I'm going to save you from the hour of trial and testing that I'm going to bring on the entire earth. He also says that there are those in the other 5 churches who haven't soiled their clothes. And then there are others who are going to be turning Do you see the stratification? Okay, so you see some who are in their covenant. They're going to be saved from the spared from the hour of trial and testing that's going to be brought on the entire earth. There are some who have not soiled their clothes. There are some who are going to repent and turn to him. Not all have the same reward, guys. Not all are on that same plane. Though all will be saved in the first resurrection, all will be part of the bride. They don't all have the same inheritance. There are some who are going to be here during the Antichrist reign, instructing many. They will not be here during that 45 days. What does it say right here? It says, then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. Does that sound like the abomination of desolation and the mark of the beast? There's a flood. Remember that he's not talking about your physical life. God says very clearly, don't fear those who kill the body, fear the one who kills both body and soul in hell. Paul says you haven't resisted sin. You haven't yet resisted sin to the point of shedding your own blood. Yet. Yet means you will. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast to their testimony about Jesus. So there's a separate group of people who are going to continue to be here, who are going to be going through more fire in order to be purified, made spotless, and refined, and they will die. They will be martyred. Every one of God's people will be martyred at this time in history. Now, when it says that the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth, people are dying. The wise are dying. Is that a tragedy? I mean, it depends on your perspective. It depends on whose perspective you're going, like you're looking at these things, your perspective or God's perspective. First of all, do you really want to be here at this time? I'm telling you today, as I'm in this thing, that I've been doing this for 520 days as of today. I'm ready. My heart's ready to be done with this. He has to break me down and strip me and everything else that I've got. I mean, I'm suffering here, you guys. I'm not living my best life. I'm suffering to do what I do with you because this is my duty. This is what God set me apart to do, and I'm suffering. You're going to suffer too as you're doing this. I'm not saying anything that is different from what's been said in the Bible. Paul said that he wanted to go too, but that it was better that he stay for the sake of the church, and that's exactly how I feel. Every day, I'm going to do this with all my might until it's time for me to go. So understand my position when I say to those of you who don't take advantage of what it is that you've been given by God at this point in history. It's like it's an offense to me too. I'm doing this with all my might for free so that there's no hindrance to any of you. I suffer the financial burden. I go to God and wonder if I'm going to be, you're going to take care of me, right? I'm going to God every morning with my grief over what I'm seeing and the messages that I receive. I'm broken down emotionally, physically, in order to be in a position of grief, like continual grief, so that I can be used by God, so that I'm always weak and I'm always in that position of grief. Why? God tells us to be in that position of grief because that's the way that we return to him, isn't it? So try to understand the position I'm in, because this is the very position you will be in. You cannot be strong if you're going to serve him. You're going to have to be weak. You cannot be a big shot if you're going to serve him. You're going to have to be the scum of the earth. Do you think that by the time you get there that you're going to be like, but I really don't want to leave here? Let me know when you get it, because this life is not what we thought. Okay, so I hope you guys understand that. I hope you understand that there are going to be wise who are instructing many, and that those who have waited, okay, please hear what I'm saying. Those who have waited foolishly to return to God, the best that can happen for you is that you're going to be here being tormented. You're going to be here a long time, and it's not going to be pretty. You will not be spared from the hour of trial and testing that God is going to bring on the entire earth to test the inhabitants of the earth and to purify. The process of making gold, it goes into the fire, and the impurities are separated. It's going to hurt. All right, I hope that this has been edifying. I hope it's taken your understanding a little bit deeper. As always, please discern with God.